Welcome, everybody, to a deep dive into how relationships are changing in our modern world.
Ooh, interesting.
We're doing something a little different today. Our source material is actually a fascinating discussion with a relationship expert from, believe it or not, a really popular Arabic language podcast.
Wow.
We thought, instead of the usual do this, don't do that, relationship advice, why not go deeper? Like, what are the bigger forces at play that are shaping how we connect, or sometimes how we don't connect these days?
That's really cool. I'm curious. So how does this expert, what kind of connections is he making?
Well, he's linking these changes in how we relate to each other to these like huge shifts in our fundamental worldviews.
Oh, wow.
For example, he argues that, especially in some parts of the world, the decline of religion has left this kind of inner void for a lot of people.
So without that sense of a higher power to, guide them.
Exactly. So without that moral compass, how do we navigate all the tricky stuff? Like right and wrong in relationships. Does it leave us morally adrift?
It sounds like it could, right?
That's exactly what he suggests. This expert says that this absence of a higher power can lead to like moral ambiguity. And, it's like without that compass, figuring out ethical dilemmas, especially within relationships, just gets a lot tougher.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
And it makes you wonder, like, why is it that, as this expert observes, even people who aren't particularly religious, they often turn to some concept of a higher power when things get tough, when they're in distress.
That's interesting. So what he's saying, it's not just about traditional religious beliefs.
It seems like it's more about this really basic human need to make meaning, especially when relationships get rocky. It's like, even in a secular world, we're still searching for something bigger than ourselves.
Oh, I see. So we've got this potential void left by declining religious influence. But I'm guessing this expert, he doesn't stop there, right?
Definitely not. He also links this to another huge shift. The rise of scientific thought and kind of hand in hand, the rise of materialism. How do those factor into our relationships?
I'm curious.
Well, he says that as our focus is shifted away from, the soul and more towards the tangible, like our bodies, outward achievements, our relationships, they kind of start to feel more, more transactional.
Oh, so instead of valuing each other for who we are deep down, it becomes more about what can you do for me? What do you bring to the table?
Precisely.
So basically, he's saying relationships are starting to feel a bit like a business deal.
In a way, yeah. And to make his point, he uses some pretty eye-opening examples, like things we see every day.
Okay, like what?
Think about the hyper-focus on physical appearance in online dating, or the obsession with having these big, expensive weddings, often, it seems, at the expense of actually, cultivating a real connection.
That's a good point, but wouldn't you say those things like the emphasis on looks in these lavish weddings, aren't those also influenced by just, changing social norms or even the media? It's not all about materialism, right?
Oh, for sure. And that's what makes this whole thing so complex.
Yeah.
It's not about blaming one thing, but it's about trying to understand all these threads that are weaving this really intricate picture of modern relationships.
Right, it's all connected.
All right, so let's go a little deeper into this whole relationships becoming more transactional thing.
Okay.
He uses this strong word, dehumanized. What does he actually mean by that? Dehumanized.
Well, I think this dehumanization, it's actually happening on a few different levels.
Okay.
So first, think about efficiency, which has become this mantra in modern life.
Oh, yeah, got to be efficient.
Right. And so many of the systems we have today, they're designed for speed, for convenience, but they often end up prioritizing these quick transactions over real human connection.
Yeah, we're always rushing, always optimized.
Exactly. And sometimes, in that process, we just lose sight of the human element.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about, you see this everywhere. And this expert, he used a really poignant example. He talks about the healthcare system. How impersonal that can often feel. Like patients end up feeling more like numbers than actual people.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely felt that way.
And unfortunately, that same mindset, it can creep into our personal relationships.
Oh, so we end up treating each other like transactions, too.
It can make us less patient, less understanding with each other. Like we're importing the efficiency model from the corporate world into our personal lives.
Right, like time is money, even in our relationships.
And I wonder, is that what leads to this sense of disposability in relationships?
Yeah.
That the expert talks about. Like it's easier to just end things rather than putting in the effort to fix them.
You're picking up on a really important connection here.
Okay.
This expert, he links this dehumanizing aspect of efficiency to what he calls throwaway culture.
Throwaway culture. Oh, I've definitely heard that term before.
Right, and it comes from this idea of planned obsolescence, like things are made to break down, so we have to buy new ones.
Oh, okay. So are we applying that same mentality, that same throwaway mentality to our relationships?
That's exactly what he's saying. He argues that because it's become so easy to replace things in our material world, it's fostered this whole attitude of disposability. So it's easier to just discard a relationship, to just throw it away, rather than putting in the time and energy to actually repair it.
So it's easier to just get a new one.
Yeah, and he even points to like all these social media posts out there, encouraging people to just end relationships at the first sign of trouble.
The commitment itself is becoming like a relic of the past.
Right.
Is that because we're like scared of being vulnerable, or is it that we genuinely just want like better, more fulfilling connections?
That is the question, isn't it? And this expert, he actually tells this story, this really compelling personal anecdote. He was talking to a plumber, and the plumber, before he even started working, insisted on a contract.
Oh, wow.
And the expert sees that whole interaction as a symptom of this deep distrust, this fear of being taken advantage of.
It's fascinating how even something like, hiring a plumber can reveal these anxieties about vulnerability and commitment in our modern world.
Oh, absolutely. And this actually brings us to another huge aspect of modern relationships.
Okay.
The double-edged sword of technology.
It's a double-edged sword. Yeah.
Because on the one hand, technology is connecting us globally, but it can also isolate us emotionally.
Right. It's kind of a paradox. We're more connected than ever, yet we're also like increasingly lonely.
Yeah.
What does he have to say about that?
So he points out that social media, even with all its benefits, it often lacks that depth and accountability that we find in face-to-face interaction. So it can create this illusion of connection, but it gets in the way of real intimacy.
It's like, how do you reconcile this desire we all have for connection with the reality of living these increasingly digital lives? It's like a dilemma everyone's facing.
Totally. And to illustrate this, he shares this really relatable anecdote.
Oh, I like anecdotes.
Right. He talks about how, back in the day, we used to avoid eye contact with strangers in cars.
Oh, yeah.
But now we're more likely to like have a casual conversation with a stranger through a ride-sharing app.
That's true. It's like suddenly we're okay with connecting with strangers through technology, but we're struggling to maintain these deep connections with people we actually know.
It's really strange, right? And this expert ties this to a broader societal phenomenon, something he calls amobia.
Amobia.
Okay. It's actually the Arabic word for anomie, which is basically this breakdown of societal norms and values.
Okay.
And he's suggesting that as these traditional structures weaken, like family and religion, people are left without that clear moral compass. And this leads to confusion, this sense of meaninglessness, especially in the relationships.
Oh, wow. So we're not just talking about like individual anxieties and choices. Yeah. We're talking about these huge societal shifts that are changing how we relate to each other.
Exactly. Amobia, it's everywhere.
So this amobia, does he give any examples of how it shows up in our lives?
He does, and it's actually really insightful. He points to furniture design. He's observed how things like chairs they're losing their intended purpose. They're becoming more about form over function.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's like this clever analogy for how disoriented, a lot of people feel in the modern world, this lack of clear purpose, and it even affects our relationships.
Oh, that's deep. It's like the design of our physical environment is mirroring that sense of uncertainty and fragmentation that we're also seeing in our connections with each other.
Exactly.
Wow. So we've got this perfect storm of societal shifts creating this really challenging environment for building and sustaining any kind of lasting relationship.
I know, right? But, it's not all doom and gloom, because the expert also points out that these same shifts have brought us an era of like unprecedented freedom and self-expression.
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets really interesting because while these changes are creating like serious challenges, they're also giving us opportunities to redefine what relationships mean to us, to create connections that are more genuine, more authentic.
That's exactly it. You get it.
So how do we embrace this freedom without getting lost in all the uncertainty? How do we actually build lasting, meaningful relationships when everything around us is pushing us toward towards being more individualistic, toward these fleeting connections?
Those are the million-dollar questions, and that's exactly what we'll be exploring as we continue our deep dive.
It's interesting to think about how this, all this talk about freedom and individualism, how that actually plays out in our relationships. I'm curious, how does this expert see the idea of commitment? Like, how's that changing in this new world?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's something he really dives into. He observes that, in the past, duty played a much bigger role in relationships, especially within families.
Okay.
Like, people were more likely to just, stick it out, even when things were tough, because they had this deep sense of obligation.
Right. Like, it was expected that you'd make sacrifices for the family, even if it meant, like, putting your own needs aside.
Exactly. And while that might sound kind of restrictive to us now, it also provided this sense of stability, of security. You knew you could count on your family, on your community, no matter what. But today, with all this emphasis on, individual happiness, individual fulfillment, we're much quicker to just walk away from relationships that aren't meeting our needs. And that goes for romantic relationships, friendships, even family.
So is it that we just have less tolerance for discomfort now? Or is it that we're just more aware of what we want, what we deserve from our relationships?
It's probably a bit of both, don't you think?
Yeah, probably.
I mean, this expert, he argues that the bar for what we consider acceptable in a relationship, that bar has definitely been raised. We're just not willing to settle for anything less than what we believe we deserve, which, it can be empowering.
Oh, for sure.
But it can also be really challenging.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about how all these changing expectations are changing how we interact with everyone.
Yeah, totally.
And speaking of interactions, this expert also talks about communication, in modern relationships.
Oh, yeah. Communication.
Technology's made it easier than ever to stay connected, but is it actually helping us communicate better?
Well, that's where things get a little complicated. This expert, he acknowledges that technology is convenient, but he also points out some potential downsides.
Okay.
He suggests that while social media is great for, sharing updates and staying in touch on a basic level, it can also lead to misunderstandings.
Misunderstandings.
Even conflict.
Why is that? Is it because it's so easy to misinterpret tone in text messages and stuff?
That's definitely part of it. He emphasizes that so much of how we communicate as humans, it's nonverbal, right?
Yeah.
Facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, all these subtle cues, and they get lost when we're just relying on text or emojis. It's like trying to decode a secret message.
That's a good way to put it.
And we don't always get it right.
And isn't there also this pressure to present this perfect version of ourselves online? Does that make it harder to really connect with people?
That's a really, really important point, because social media, it often encourages us to project this idealized image of ourselves, the happy, successful, put-together facade,
right,
even when we're feeling the exact opposite.
The complete opposite, yeah.
And it all ties back to this idea of relationships becoming more transactional. It's like we're always trying to market ourselves as these desirable products instead of just being real, being vulnerable.
This is so true. I think everyone feels this pressure to have this perfect online image.
Oh, for sure.
Even if it's totally fake. Does this expert, does he have any advice for how we can deal with this? This tension between who we are online versus who we are in real life?
Yeah, he encourages us to be more aware of how we're using technology, to be mindful of the potential downsides. Instead of getting sucked into that endless scroll, he suggests using technology to actually have more meaningful conversations, like video calls with loved ones who live far away, or joining online forums where you can have these deep discussions with people who share your interests.
So it's about using technology as a tool to strengthen our connections instead of letting it replace real life interaction.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, being intentional with how we engage with the digital world.
It seems like one of the biggest challenges now is learning to be more present, more patient in our relationships. With everything moving so fast, how do we cultivate those qualities? Slowing down, really being there for each other.
This is where this expert brings up this idea of relationship wisdom. Have you ever heard that term?
Relationship wisdom. I love that. What is that?
It's about going beyond the surface level, beyond shared interests or that initial spark of attraction.
Yeah.
It's about developing a deeper understanding of ourselves and others, recognizing our own needs, our own patterns, but also being attuned to the needs and perspectives of the people we're in relationships with.
So it sounds like it requires a certain level of like self-awareness and emotional intelligence.
Oh, absolutely. And it's something we can develop, through practice, through reflection. The expert, he emphasizes that building this relationship wisdom, it starts with developing a strong sense of self. He calls it a healthy relationship with the self.
So it's about knowing ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, what we value, and being comfortable with who we are.
Exactly, not needing that external validation to feel worthy. And he makes a really important distinction between self-love and egotism.
Okay. That's interesting.
He argues that true self-love, it's about recognizing our inherent worth as human beings.
Yeah.
But egotism is more about like inflating our own importance, trying to be superior to others.
Oh, that's a good distinction. It's like the difference between genuine confidence, which comes from self-acceptance, and arrogance, which is often like hiding insecurity.
You got it. And he believes that having this strong foundation of self-worth, it's essential for any healthy relationship. Because when we approach relationships from this place of grounded confidence, of self-acceptance, we're less likely to be driven by neediness or insecurity. And those things can create all sorts of, unhealthy dynamics.
So instead of looking to our partners or friends to fill some kind of void within us, we're coming to the relationship as whole individuals, ready to share our authentic selves.
Beautifully said. Imperfections and all, right?
Exactly. And this leads to another really important part of relationship wisdom, learning to tell the difference between acceptance and resignation.
Ah, that's interesting. Can you say more about that?
Yeah.
Well, he gives the example of someone who's, struggling with their body image.
Okay.
He says that accepting your body, it doesn't mean giving up on being healthy or making positive changes.
Right.
It simply means acknowledging and appreciating yourself as you are right now, while still, striving to be the best version of yourself.
So it's about that balance between self-love and self-improvement.
Exactly. We're all works in progress, right?
Always.
And he believes this same principle applies to our relationships with other people. We can accept them for who they are, even with their flaws and quirks, while also setting healthy boundaries and communicating our needs.
It's about recognizing that we're all complex, we're all on our own unique journeys, and real connection comes from embracing that complexity in ourselves and in others.
Well,
this expert, he's got me thinking. I'm curious, how does he see this modern obsession we all have with speed and efficiency? How's that affecting our ability to nurture those deeper connections?
So here's where he uses this really brilliant metaphor. He compares relationships to meals.
Okay.
He contrasts like fast food with a home-cooked meal.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Fast food, it's convenient, it's instantly gratifying, but it doesn't have the same depth, the same nourishment as a meal that's prepared with care and attention.
I love that analogy. It's
Yeah.
about slowing down and enjoying the process.
Exactly, both in our relationships and just in life in general.
Right.
And he argues that we've kind of lost sight of that in our quest for instant gratification. We're so used to quick fixes and easy solutions that we don't have the patience or the willingness to work through challenges, both in our personal lives and in our relationships.
It's like we've forgotten the art of slow cooking a relationship, letting it simmer, letting those flavors develop over time.
That's a great way to put it.
And instead, we're just grabbing whatever's quick and easy, even if it leaves us feeling empty afterwards.
That's exactly it. And he links this back to amobia, that sense of disorientation, the lack of clear values.
Right, amobia.
Which can really, permeate our relationships. I mean, when we're constantly bombarded with these messages of instant gratification and disposability, it's no wonder we struggle to invest in the slow, messy work of building real connection.
It's true. So in a world that's constantly telling us to hurry up, to be more efficient, how do we reclaim that sense of patience, of presence in our relationships? Where do we even begin?
Well, the expert, he offers a few practical suggestions. One is to cultivate a sense of gratitude for the people in our lives.
Okay, gratitude.
When we focus on what we appreciate about others, it changes our perspective.
It's about focusing on what we have instead of what's missing.
Exactly. And he makes this beautiful point about how gratitude helps us to see the gifts in our relationships, even when things are difficult.
I like that, the gifts.
And he also talks about the importance of forgiveness. Forgiving ourselves and forgiving others.
Okay.
Because holding onto anger, onto resentment, it poisons our relationships. It keeps us stuck in the past.
That's such a crucial point. Forgiving someone, it doesn't mean we're condoning their behavior. It's about choosing to let go of that negativity.
It's about choosing love over resentment, understanding over judgment.
And that's a powerful message, I think, to carry with us as we navigate the complexities of relationships, of life, really.
I agree.
It's about remembering that we're all imperfect,
Okay.
capable of both hurting and healing.
Right.
And that real connection comes from a place of compassion and understanding.
That's beautiful.
I'm really enjoying this deep dive. It's giving me a lot to think about in terms of my own relationships.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's always fascinating to explore these complex dynamics, and to see how they show up in our own lives.
As we wrap up this part of our conversation, what are some key takeaways you think our listeners should reflect on?
I think one of the most important things to remember is that building and sustaining meaningful relationships, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
It's an ongoing process of learning, of growing, of adapting.
As individuals and as partners.
Exactly.
We've talked about so much already, but I'm really curious to hear more about, like, what can we actually do? What are this expert suggestions for building more fulfilling relationships in this crazy modern world we live in? Where do we even start?
Well, you've hit on, like, this central tension we've been circling around, right? This pull between individualism and that deep-seated need we all have for connection. And this expert, he actually offers some really practical advice for navigating this. One of his suggestions is to be more deliberate about creating, like, shared rituals with the people we care about.
Okay, shared rituals. What does that actually look like?
It doesn't have to be anything fancy or formal, It could be as simple as, like, having dinner together regularly, or going for walks, or even just setting aside some time each week to just talk without any distractions.
I love that, because in a world that's constantly, like, begging for our attention, it's so easy to let those simple but meaningful moments just slip away.
It's true.
So creating these rituals is like a way of actually prioritizing connection.
Yeah.
Even amidst all the chaos.
Exactly. It's about making space for genuine connection. And it's not just about, our one-on-one relationships. This expert also talks about the importance of doing things that build community.
So thinking beyond our immediate circles and looking for ways to connect with the wider world.
Exactly. Think about volunteering or joining a club or group, or even just making more of an effort to connect with your neighbors.
Right.
It's a reminder that we're not just these isolated individuals. We're part of something bigger.
I think sometimes we forget that, especially when we're spending so much time online.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, with all this emphasis on online interaction,
Yeah.
are we losing the ability to have those meaningful, like, face-to-face conversations?
That's another point this expert brings up. He argues that in a world that's so full of superficial interactions and online chatter, we've kind of lost the art of deep, engaging dialogue.
Oh, interesting.
We're so quick to judge or to offer advice that we often don't really listen to each other.
It's like we're more focused on getting our point across than actually hearing what the other person is saying.
Exactly. He encourages us to be more curious in our interactions,
Okay.
to ask thoughtful questions,
Yeah.
to really listen with an open heart and mind. Because when we feel heard, when we feel understood, that's what creates space for deeper connection.
It's true. And, it's funny, we've been talking about all the potential downsides of technology, but he actually suggests that we can use technology to have these kinds of meaningful conversations.
Oh, that's right. He's not anti-technology.
Right.
He just wants us to use it more consciously.
Yeah.
Like, using video calls to have those deeper conversations with loved ones who live far away, or joining online forums where you can really engage with people who share your interests, your values.
So it's about using the tools we have to actually make our connections stronger, not weaker.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what are some of the things that stood out to you, as a listener? What are some of those nuggets of wisdom that you'll take with you into your own relationships?
For me, it's this overarching idea of relationship wisdom. It's not about following a set of rigid rules. It's about cultivating a deeper understanding of ourselves, of other people, and then choosing to engage in relationships in a way that's intentional, that's authentic, that's compassionate.
I love that. It's about approaching relationships as this lifelong journey of growth and discovery, both as individuals and together.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the final thought-provoking question that this expert leaves us with. How can we hold on to our humanity? How can we build those meaningful connections in a world that's so driven by efficiency, by individualism, by technology?
It's a question that challenges us to be more mindful, more intentional, more present in all of our interactions.
It's true.
And it invites us to slow down, to step back from the craziness of modern life and rediscover the simple joys of human connection.
It's a journey worth taking.
It is. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder these questions, to apply these insights to your own relationships. Until next time, fellow deep divers, may your connections be deep, meaningful, and filled with joy.